the get-go, it was obvious what kind of mood and composition I wanted for Deadpool and Wolverine. Boyish, rugged, and have an overall urban vibe to the scene, with strong backlighting for extra emphasis on the silhouette of the characters. And, coincidentally, Shota Goshizono has an illustration which has a similar composition to the one I already had in mind. And rather than brute force, pushing and pulling poses to fit the vision, why not already use a tool which Clip Studio Paint has within its arsenal? 3D models are an amazing way to quickly and effectively test out your posing and composition, and also allows you to see if you need to make adjustments to fit the scene better, and thankfully, the one I had in mind seemed to work. This step involved a lot of study, as this was the aspect I was most excited to practice. An artist who was eager to study was Kane, who had coincidentally posted their own Wolverine art during the process, who frankly has better understanding of their fundamentals than I do right now. Their knowledge of anatomy, color, and volumetric shading was just out of this world. Even without color, you can easily map out the planes of the different features of the character, and that was what I wanted to achieve the most. There were other aspects of their art, such as hiding features because of perspective, and if the object in front of it was thick or large enough to obstruct it. The knowledge on how to apply this greatly helped in my future figure drawings. So as I was sketching out the different features of Deadpool and Wolverine, I was keeping their technique in mind, already imagining where areas of light and dark would go to give their figure volume. After filling in the sketch with the gray color, the silhouette was perfect! Now, it was time to render Deadpool and Wolverine. Something which I'd been dying to try out was doing grayscale rendering to color. But first off, I had to figure out how to apply values to the current silhouette. If you're unaware, values are essentially light and dark. Different values communicate many things, such as the intensity of the light source, and the surrounding environment where the characters are sitting. Therefore, if I wanted to put emphasis on the silhouette, I had to be clever to keep a strong contrast between Deadpool and Wolverine, and the strong backlighting. In addition to figure studies, beforehand I also did a shading study in one of Kane's pieces, trying to understand the different techniques and tools which they use for their art. In the end, the main technique which I took away was the lasso plus airbrush combination, which is perfect for making rounded edges which had a sharp taper. Also, making a hard edge stroke, then blurring one side is a useful technique that can be used for a variety of purposes, such as clothing wrinkles, skin, and hair. This was especially useful on the edges of the gloves and the main torso of Deadpool. I also found that the closer something got to the camera, the darker it became. This also meant things closer to the edges of the canvas could also become darker, bringing focus to the silhouette and face of Deadpool and Wolverine. Finally, it came time to apply the color over the grayscale rendering of Deadpool and Wolverine, which actually turned out way easier than I thought it would be. I had watched Lucas Pianador's video on how to transform grayscale rendering to color, making a few adjustments to fit my personal layer management. Firstly, split the different colored segments onto their own layers using clipping mask. In Deadpool's case, the red, black, and white were on 3 separate layers. Then, place all these layers into a folder, then set the folder's blend mode to overlay. And there, it looks much better. I repeated that process for Wolverine and the background, and that looks really good. It looks good? I was expecting it to look this good. Referring back to Kane's rendering, huge reason why their characters look so voluminous was through the use of contrasting colors. As this piece was mostly red so far, I used a soft blue light as a secondary light source to see where it would immerse the characters more into the world. But of course, there was the big light source behind Deadpool and Wolverine which just had to be addressed. Before I went on to add rim lighting, I had considered the fact that the excess use of it would ruin the silhouette of the two. In the end, I decided to make 2 versions, one with rim lighting and one without. Which one do you think looks better? Comment down below. By using the linear dodge blend mode with this nice soft square brush and the standard airbrush, it was more than enough to take me through the step. And before I knew it, this piece just needed a bit more to give it a polished look. By observing illustrations with a longer time for rendering, I wanted to see what was left I could add to give this illustration a better finish. Wong's illustration here puts a lot of detail into the texture of the fabric, in addition to other effects such as dust and Gaussian blur. How I added these small details on Deadpool's suit was pretty easy. Firstly, find a pattern with a transparent background which matches. In this case, it was a fishnet pattern to match the many round circles on Deadpool's suit. Then, Turn on alpha lock, or lock transparent pixels, and color in with the color of your rim light. In my case, it was a standard bright yellow. Then, grid transform the material into place, and make sure that it forms around the object. Finally, set the blend mode to add glow, and lightly erase the edges with an airbrush, following the form of whatever the material is on. Then, after giving the illustration a Gaussian blur around the edges and some dust particles, it was done! An illustration that, while not perfect, was able to be a vessel for a lot of new experiments into places I had never thought I'd venture into. But just because it was done doesn't mean it was done. If we never reflect on what we've learned, or examine what we want to learn, improvements just won't come. This is arguably the most important step in this entire process, and honestly the most exciting. It just means that there will be more for me to learn and study. Though, my top 3 takeaways to improve on were... I will admit, the background was an afterthought. Don't do what I did, and take the time to understand the purpose of why a background looks like the way it does, beyond just trying to arbitrarily copy a reference. In the same vein as the last point, there were so many points in this illustration where I'd skimped out on effort, and left certain areas unrefined and unpolished. I mean, come on, look at Wolverine's face! Over time, these unrefined details built up and negatively impacted the overall look of the piece. The moment that this illustration became not fun to work on, I should have just left it alone. Don't get me wrong, it was super fun to work on something new and exciting, but once the process starts dragging, it's okay to take breaks. After all, this was just a personal piece. Nobody's going to get mad if it takes 1 year or 1 week. And that's okay. This is one of the first videos on my channel. I hope that you all subscribe, comment down below, and stick around for more.